السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. حسين حسين.
Okay, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to both of you. Thank you so much for being here for today's podcast. This is the first in our series ongoing on reform. And we are very interested in learning from Abu Abdullah ways that we can start to improve and grow as individuals and ultimately as a community. But everything begins with the individual and the work that we are doing, and the efforts we go through to learn from Imam Hussein and take some provision from Muharram and Ashura for our own individual journeys. And this starts with the heart, with the qalb. And we're going to go through other aspects of the human being, but the human heart seems to be a very central location for reformation and for being better and for improving. So we want to understand what we mean by the heart in order to know how do I reform my heart for the sake of Abu Abdullah. So if we could bring with you, inshallah, Sheikh Mirza, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This word, qalb, heart, when me and you are using it, first, is that even a good translation? But secondly, what do we mean by the qalb in the Islamic tradition? What part of ourselves are we referring to?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Brother Abbas and Brother Aliasghar and all who are watching us. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think when you said everything begins with the individual, I think everything begins with Allah. It is Allah who awakens us. It is Allah who puts that love of Imam Hussein in our heart. It is Allah who invites us. We are nothing. So therefore, it begins with Allah. And if we are worthy of purifying ourselves, we are worthy of being of some value, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will purify us, inshallah. Like as you said, yes, heart is a very it has a pivotal aspect in human life, in human being and becoming. It is really heart that would bring a change, that will bring a reward, that will be perceptive compared to other things that are mentioned, for example, aql as well. I mean, when it comes to the terminology of qalb or heart, this terminology or this term heart have been used parallel to, or you can say it is a synonym of even nafs. And sometimes we see nafs being used as heart, sometimes heart as in heart, sometimes even ruh, is considered as a heart. So you would always see these being used, heart as nafs, as ruh. So not to confuse with aql, for example. Aql and heart. There's a battle of aql and heart. We also find, in the tafsir of Surah Yusuf, in the beginning part of the tafsir in Surah Nasima wa Jawadi, he discusses the three realms of jihad: jihad asghar, jihad awsat, and jihad akbar. When he discusses jihad akbar, actually he discusses the jihad of the intellect and heart. Heart is something that sees, intellect is something that calculates. The Urafa, they see things, and sometimes what they are seeing could be beyond intellectual capacity to comprehend. And from an intellectual and logical point of view, may not befit the equation. However, when it comes to the heart, it has a different calculation. Imam Hussein taking his family to Karbala is not a logical and intellectual calculation as such. It is beyond that. Right? Imam Hussein invited everybody on the night just before the battle. He says, I let you go. I turned the light off as well. What is this? And then he also guarantees that, I will guarantee you paradise. So you are inviting everyone, now you are letting them go. This is what, this like, okay. So it's beyond intellectual calculation. Once again, this points out to the school of heart, to the school of love, to the school of beyond intellectual capacity as such. Prophet reached to وَقَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنَ وَأَدْنَى, and then Jibreel says, I can't go any further. If I go any further, my wings will burn. But what went further than that is the heart of the Prophet. If we regard the Aql Rasul as Jibreel, but what went on Mi'raj is Aql stops, the heart goes further, is the qalb Rasul. So heart is a very unique phenomenon. And it is true that, and it's at a constant, if even if you look at that physical aspect of it, which, in Islamic terminology is beyond physical aspect. However, you do find that heart is something that is constantly pounding, constantly changing, constantly moving, that aspect as well. So the same way the nafs insan, is constantly changing, it should be improving all the time. So just a brief, perspective, so to speak, that we find within the Islamic sciences or Islamic knowledge, the understanding of heart. For example, hardness of the heart, that you find has been discussed a lot. Imam Hussein refers to this in Ashura a lot. Your hearts have become hard. I've been trying to advise you. I've been trying to guide you, but my advice is falling on deaf ears because your hearts have become hard. Hazrat Zainab as well, in his khutbahs, you'll find, your hearts have become hard. Right? Once again, it's the heart, the element of the nafs, the element of, seeing the truth. If the heart becomes hard, it is unable to see the truth. If the heart is soft, latif, is subtle. The heart of a child, the heart of even child in the sense that, a child who is closer to that fitra, or an even heart of a child, meaning that the heart that is soft, even if that person is old. They have individuals who supported Imam Hussein were older too, they were not only one. But what I'm trying to say is that a soft heart, not a hard heart. So you do find these terminologies in Ashura, in the khutbah, or in the sermons of Imam Hussein, in the sermon of Hazrat Zainab. So it goes to the heart. In the end, heart is a very important, a very unique phenomena, reality that requires many of us to research, to read, to investigate, to discuss. Sorry, I spoke too much.
No, thank you for speaking this much. I wish you could speak more, and that's why I have more questions. But this point you mentioned, and a few of them are so relevant for our listeners, especially about the heart, something which is constantly changing and growing. The one listening might think, well, how do I proceed in my level of growth? Or for example, the heart is soft and can become hard, or is hard and can become soft. Well, how do I make my heart softer? These are all active questions we can ask ourselves. But in order to systemize these things, let's go back to one point you mentioned about the battle of the heart, or the jihad of the self. This seems like a constant theme in our literature, and you mentioned Surah Yusuf, and I think it's found in many verses. Brother Aliasghar, assalamu alaikum to you, inshallah. This idea of the jihad of the self or the struggle of the heart, do we find it in the Quran? What is the language of it in our scripture? How is it described to us?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم to you both and to all of our viewers inshallah. I think the Sheikh actually started really well talking about the centrality of the heart, and we find even Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam in the Quran in Surah Al-Shu'ara, Surah 26, he says, "O Allah, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ." Except the one who comes on that day with a heart which is salim, which is serene, peaceful, safe. That's the sort of heart we want to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. And we find that often in our scripture, as in the Sheikh beautifully mentioned the aql, we find that our qalb and our hawa, or our desires, are sometimes put at loggerheads with each other. If one dua comes to mind, the dua as-sabah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayh, when he goes into sujood, he says, "Ilahi qalbi mahjoob." My Lord, my qalb is mahjoob, it is veiled. Wa nafsi ma'yoob, my soul, my nafs is deficient. Wa aqli makhloob, my aql is defeated. Wa hawa'i ghalib, my desires are they're the ones who are winning. My desires are victorious. And you find there's actually an interesting hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ghurur al-Hikam wa Durar al-Karam. Amir al-Mu'mineen has a tradition where he says that for example, the aql is the army of ar-Rahman inside us, and the hawa are the army of shaitan. And so we find that in Islamic scripture, there is often this talk about this internal battle between our aql, our qalb, and our hawa, our desires. Or for example, in Surah Yusuf, as the Sheikh mentioned, in Surah 12, verse about 53, Allah, I believe Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says, "Inna an-nafsa la'ammaratun bis-su' illa ma rahima rabbi." Surely the nafs, the self-abasing self, the commanding self, commands towards evil, except that which Allah has mercy upon me on. And so we know from we've known that the qalb is, or tazkiyah of this qalb, is something which is vital in our lives. As in the Sheikh mentioned that there's different terminologies, qalb, nafs. On every Eid you'll often hear that Surah Al-Shams, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes all those oaths, and he says, وَنَفْسُ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Surely the one who is victorious is the one who purifies that nafs. And surely the one who loses is the one who allows that nafs to become corrupt. And interestingly, Abbas, you mentioned the word islah. Islah, I believe in its actual terminology, while we always talk about what we call reformation, the actual meaning of islah means to bring something back to its original purpose. Sometimes when we give words like revolution or reformation, sometimes I think they spark interest a lot more with people. So we use these terms, reformation, revolution, changing something. But actually, islah means to bring it back to its original purpose, to bring it back, to change it back to what it was before. Not just necessarily change it, because you can reform laws, but bring out new laws to reform the old laws. Islah is not bringing out something new, it's bringing it back to its original self. And so the nafs or the qalb has a certain capacity and a certain quality. And we have a certain fitrah that we're meant to act upon. Allah says, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. Allah talks about the fitrah which He has originated us upon. And so this qalb, our journey in life, interestingly, is to bring it back to the purity that we started out with as a child. Except now we use the aql to be able to guide it, and to use them together to be able to bring about new realities. And so we often find that within ourselves we have desires. We have these things that are important for our development. No one says desires are wrong, for example. But we have to use something to channel those desires. Otherwise the heart becomes covered over, mahjoob, as the Imam says in the dua. And that's why I believe in the hadiths, our Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, often they say, for example, one of the things that cause qaswatul qalb, the hardness of the heart, is persistence in sinning. And we don't persist in sinning unless we are obeying shaitan or obeying our desires. If we're going to be very simplistic about it, a sin is usually when we're not obeying Allah and we're obeying our self-desires or the temptations of the shaitan. And so it is this sort of persistence in these actions, persistence in these things that cause our heart to become rusted over, our heart to become hardened. And often you'll find that this is why shaitan, often our scholars, when they talk about shaitan in the Quran, Allah interestingly doesn't say, for example, in Surah Yasin, Allah says, وَلَا تَعْبُدُ الشَّيْطَانِ, do not obey the shaitan. But in other verses, Allah says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. And Allah, why does He mention footsteps? Because shaitan takes us slowly. He doesn't just take us into darkness. He doesn't just take us straight into sinning. So for example, he might make the sin seem low in your eyes. For example, swearing, very common, unfortunately, in our communities, Muslim, non-Muslim, wherever we go, swearing is normal. You'll hear it in the workplace, you'll hear it on TV and channels and shows that people watch for leisure. Swearing is just normal. And so you'll see this profane language, when you first hear it, the qalb reacts. Something's wrong, this doesn't feel right. But then what happens as you hear it more, the qalb starts to get used to it. Then it becomes a little bit, desensitized. It's not that big a deal. Everyone swears. Then slowly the heart becomes rusted and veiled. And then at that point, you're able to kind of even engage in the action. You're angry or something big happens and you swear. That's a slow process, and that's the footsteps of the shaitan. And so that process of the heart becoming kind of veiled over is sometimes a slow process. And that's why Islam, to counter this, the Ahlul Bayt such as Imam al-Kadhim, what does he say? He says, Laysa minna. He is not of us who does not account for himself every single day. Because the process of the hardening of the heart is a slow process. And so we find in Islamic scripture, as I mentioned, our aim goal is to come to Allah with a qalb which is salim. And this purification of the soul and the heart is something that could be said to be our purpose in life. And this battle is something which is constant, because that heart veils over very easily, but very slowly. And so we have to constantly be on guard against this, inshallah.
Ahsan, dear brother, what I have gained from many of those points is that we now see the reality of the qalb with a bit more detail as a existing real thing. This is not just words. It has a mechanism, it has stages, it has its own potential, and it has its own purpose, like we're mentioning. This is a vehicle or a tool or a part of our reality which is real. It's not words. And when we apply the word of islah, you mentioned of going back to the origin, the question then comes, and I ask this to you, Sheikh, is what is the original form of the heart? If we are trying to reform it and going back to something that it once was, what is that original stage of the qalb which we are working back towards?
Yes. Very good point mentioned by Brother Aliasghar about reform, Islah. And usually it's misinterpreted. Usually in the conventional sense today, when we say reform, we think of some sort of new adapting of something new, improving ourselves by adapting to the time and space and bringing in something that's more considered as a reform in the modern political understanding. But that's exactly right what Brother Aliasghar have said, that it's actually returning back to the original form. And that's why, if you look at the wasiyat of Imam Hussein to Abu Hanif, to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, before he leaves, he has a little wasiyah where he mentions that لطلب إصلاح في أمة جدي. I'm leaving my qiyam, my uprising, my departure from Medina is لطلب إصلاح. I would like to create reform في أمة جدي وأبي, in the nation of my ummah, of my grandfather and my father. Then right after that, he points out to the sunnah of Rasulullah, right? That means that, from a historical point of view, within the span from Rasulullah to Imam Hussein, so much was lost that Imam Hussein have to do a qiyam in order to create a reform which is going back to the original, which is the Sunnah of Rasulullah, right? So this wasiya also indicates that aspect, that Islah is actually a return to the original form. Okay? Now, the original form of the heart is that pure heart, is that every person is born a Muslim, every person is given a heart of a Muslim, which is Tawheed, which is, what do you call, fitra, that pure intrinsic nature of man. And that's all our celebrations is for, Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Adha. First is Eid al-Adha, which is Eid of the sacrifice, and then after that is actually Eid al-Fitr, which is eventually after sacrificing, a person goes back to his nature. And his nature is ithari. His nature is so not to get into that, but the original form of the heart, that pure belief of Tawheed. And when we look at Imam Hussein's methodology, or Imam Hussein's way of this reform, is actually Tawheed. Dua Arafah, if you look at it, just before he went to Karbala, you have the full of Ma'arif Tawheedi, right? Apart from that, if you look at his words, or his kalimat from Medina to last day of Ashura, once again Tawheed, Tawheed. And at the same time, inshallah, probably we will get into these discussions of ubudiyat. There's a sermon which he gives before leaving. Ya ayyuhan nas, ma khalaqa Allah, O Allah, O people, why God created the creation? In order that the creation recognizes. إِذَا عَرَفُوا abadu, they recognize and they will do worship. And then a person ask him about the what do you call, إِذَا عَرَفُوا abadu, so that you will be self-sufficient from doing worship to others. And then a person ask him, إِذَا عَرَفُوا abadu فَاسْتَغْنِيًا عِبَادِ مَاسِيَةً, then Ibn Rasulullah, ma ma'rifatullah, or Rasulullah, what is actually ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Then he says, ma'rifat of the Imam is the ma'rifat of Allah is the ma'rifat of the Imam. Okay. Now, once again, pointing out to all of the aspect of a complete, comprehensive, special and unique understanding of Tawheed through the perspective, or through the vision, or through the individual who have that ma'rifat of Tawheed, which is the Imam. Okay? Because Masumeen are considered as the Rukn Tawheed, wa arkanan li Tawheedik. In Ziyarat al-Jami', we say that they are arkan of Tawheed. There are 5 rukun of salat. If I don't do one, knowingly or unknowingly, my salat is void. So Tawheed have rukun. The rukun of Tawheed is Ahl Bayt. The Tawheed, one can understand, okay, we believe in one God. Yes, all believe. Even Christians believe in one God. They don't believe in 3 gods. They believe in Father, as a God. But they also believe in Taslis, as a Son, Holy Ghost. But they believe in one God. It's Tawheed in a way. But what type of Tawheed? Oh, that Tawheed which is introduced by, which is taught by, which is given by somebody, by Imam Masoom, by the representative of God, right? So, like as you said, that Islam, that reform, that going back to that true and original belief, and that's what Prophet Muhammad brought Tawheed. that no other prophet have brought Tawheed the way Prophet brought. So it's that belief, that Tawheed.
This is such a beautiful point to end on, especially in Muharram, because if I'm going to go on this journey of trying to find Allah Azza wa Jal in that internal way we're discussing, at some point I inevitably will reach a need to know my Imam and to know Ahlul Bayt, and obviously for Abu Abdullah as well, and the Imam of our time. Like, these things are all going to come up, and not because I'm, they come up automatically. I'm looking for God, and in the process of finding God, I find Ahlul Bayt. This way of looking at it is very helpful for the one who wants to learn from Abu Abdullah, because you're not going to Majlis to try to cry. You're not going to Majlis to try and act out a routine. You're going because it's your relationship to Allah Azza wa Jal, and that impels you to be close to Ahlul Bayt. Like, it's part of that process. And I think the one listening now going to Majalis, or maybe who cannot go to Majalis, looking at it like this helps us in finding Allah Azza wa Jal in our Azadari as well, and making sure that we are doing things for the right reasons. Let's push this thought a little bit further. Aliasghar, my dear brother, when we're in this journey of knowing Allah Azza wa Jal, at some point we always end up being close to Ahlul Bayt. Why is it that the path of Tawheed is so closely linked to the path of love for Ali Muhammad?
Because this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for it to be. I guess the thing is, when you go through the Quran, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the Quran through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And it was Rasulullah himself who would give us the hadith of Thaqalain, that I leave behind two weighty things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. And that's why, for example, when we go to the traditions on verses such as وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبِلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, and hold fast the whole rope of Allah altogether. Imam al-Baqir, in a hadith that I found in Tafsir al-Mizan, he says that this robe of Allah is consisting of two things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. And so, on the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as in we can't deny that there are people from other paths who gain some understanding of Allah. There are people from other paths, other sects in Islam, or even other religions who may become spiritual and start to gain closer towards Allah. There are some spiritual Christians in the history, such as Swedenborg, for example, who was known to have, gone. His knowledge was quite apt. For example, when you read his work, it seems quite apt. But what we find is with the Ahlul Bayt, you gain the completion, or you gain the most complete path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so anyone who's exposed to this path of the Ahlul Bayt, they're kind of enamored by the words of Ahlul Bayt bringing you towards Allah. Simple examples like Dua Kumail. I don't think there's anyone that can deny that Dua Kumail is one of the most amazing du'as towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the most amazing pouring out of a heart towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it is there that we find that the Ahlul Bayt are important, because when it came to the knowledge of Allah, if you read their sermons, when it came to the du'as connecting you to Allah, there was no individuals that could give you such knowledge as the Ahlul Bayt. And as per our theology, these were the individuals that Allah sent down as guides towards mankind. People that were the representations of Allah on earth, in Dua Nudba, أَيْنَ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ الَّذِي إِلَيْهِ يَتَوَجَّهُ الْأَوْلِيَاءُ. Where's the face of Allah to whom the awliya face? Not that Allah has a physical face, but the representative, the purest representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who everyone could turn to get towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a vital point as well, that we know that Ahlul Bayt are there because they also bring unity for us, in that they allow us to be united on one path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in the Sermon of Fadak, for example, Fatima al-Zahra, she says unity in the Ummah comes through our Iman, because it is the Imams that are able to give us the purest form of unity, because we be united in the most perfect path towards Allah. And I guess the Imams also were the most purest servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you go to try and get towards Allah, at the end of the day, everyone needs role models, examples. Now, Rasulullah was obviously the most perfect exemplar. And I guess one of the biggest things the Muslim Ummah do slightly differ upon is, how do we know who Rasulullah was? Which sources do we go through? Do we go through these individuals, or do we go through these individuals? And we find that the Ahlul Bayt give us the most perfect understanding of the Sunnah of Rasulullah, of the examples of Rasulullah, of the knowledge of Rasulullah. And so this is why we always end up with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And if I can, I'd like to just give a point that I think it'd be nice to get it confirmed by the Sheikh. And I think it's an interesting point to add here as well, that when we talk about purifying the heart or bringing the heart back to its original purpose of tawheed, and this is quite a spiritual point. It's one that I did find in Shi'i scriptures, but also maybe the more spiritual Sufi scriptures as well. There's a hadith of Imam al-Sadiq where he says, "Al-qalbu haram Allah." The qalb is a sanctuary of Allah. فَلَا تُسْكِنْ فِي حَرَمِ اللَّهِ غَيْرَ اللَّهِ. Do not allow anyone to live in that sanctuary or to reside in that sanctuary except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, there's that verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Ahzab, which we might interpret in a spiritual way, where Allah says, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّنْ قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. Allah has not put two hearts in anybody's chest. You don't have two qalbs, you have one. And so, I think this is a point, Abbas, you know I make quite a lot, especially when we teach students together in the madrasa, that some of the scholars, when they speak about Jahiliyyah, they say that Jahiliyyah perhaps never left us. And one of the beautiful spiritual interpretations I once found was that at the time of Jahiliyyah, the Kaaba was filled with idols. Now, in a spiritual sense, the true Kaaba, the true sanctuary of Allah, is the heart of a believer. And so while that physical Kaaba was full of idols, so Rasulullah came to smash the internal idols, the idols that come into this heart. Because at times we have idols which stop us from getting us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, different types of desires or greeds, or for example, money, business, a certain leisure activity. There are certain things that sometimes stop us or halt us on our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that can become an idol. And so there's many obviously beautiful interpretations about, you know, Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he destroyed the idols and he put the axe on the biggest idol. What is that biggest idol, for example? But yes, it is the Imams of Ahlul Bayt that taught us in the most complete way how to destroy these idols, which is why I often say in the kind of Fada'ili points, it's quite apt that when Rasulullah wanted to destroy the final idol, on his shoulders, he didn't choose a companion, but it was Amirul Mu'mineen who would stand on his shoulders and destroy that idol. Because this is through Amirul Mu'mineen were able to destroy these idols and actually get towards Allah in the most complete fashion.
And that, yeah, that is a lovely point to end with the zikr of Mawla, it always is. But it was your earlier points which really were making me think about a spiritual reading of the heart in this way and of Ashura. It changes what Imam Hussein's mission was from the external to the internal, you know, the actual purpose of it, which is to help us break our idols, or to help us at least identify the idols in our lives and to break them. I think so far what we have is a very good foundation for what is the qalb, what is Islah, why are Ahlul Bayt important to this process and going back to them. Let's now bring Abu Abdullah to the central point of the discussion. So Sheikhna, if I'm going to Muharram al-Majalis and I'm thinking of this point about I want to reform the heart, I want to, you know, really make some progress and do Islah. Here comes Imam al-Hussein, and he acts as some kind of template or inspiration for my journey, but it's not clear how Abu Abdullah's heart and his journey links to my journey. What is the right mentality to have to link these things together?
I think the key or the joining factor would be Imam al-Asr alayhi salam. Because there's a lot of commonality that is seen between Imam al-Asr and also Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Not just from a historical perspective, in terms of doing qiyam, so on and so forth, but also from the Riwai perspective. You know, Misbah ul-Huda is referred to Imam Hussein amongst the Aimma Masumin, and also to Imam al-Asr alayhi salam. In Ziyarat of Friday, and we refer him as that he's the Safina Najah, you know, Safina Najah, not Misbah, Safina. The ark of salvation is Imam Hussein, and you know, Inna al-Hussein, Misbah al-Huda, and Safina Najah is also for Imam Hussein and Imam al-Asr alayhi salam, right? So these two, amongst all of the Aimma, are considered as the ark of salvation. Now, our performance and our participation in the majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is to enter this Safina Nija, is to enter this ark, you know, and for us to take from these majalis, to understand what reform means, to show our love and gratitude and emotions and lessons from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, is for that purpose. We have to keep that in mind, right? This Islah, this purification, this reformation of the heart is for that very purpose. And as a matter of fact, the khutbah of Imam Hussein, which I mentioned earlier, also point out to the ma'rifat of Allah is actually the ma'rifat of the Imam of the time. Right? Now, as we also know that Awwaluna Muhammad, Awsatuna Muhammad, wa Kulluna Muhammad, the first, the middle, and the last are Muhammad. So the ma'rifat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when we look at how he was, what he did, what he's saying, you know, all of those things is mentioned in regards to Tawheed, his teaching, what legacy has left behind, how his ashab were. You know, the ashab of Imam Hussein must be like the ashab of Imam al-Asr alayhi salam. You know, that's how we should be when it comes to Imam al-Asr, how the ashab of Imam Hussein were. You know, as the fifth Imam says that, quoting quoting Rasulullah, actually eventually quoting his father and then quoting Rasulullah, he says the ashab of Imam Hussein, this is in Kamil Ziyara, the book, it says the ashab of Imam Hussein were individuals where the iron had no effect on them. Their bodies were cut by iron, but it had no effect on them, in the same way as the fire had no effect on Ibrahim. Ibrahim is the champion of Tawheed. When he was tossed in the fire, Jibreel came to him. He said, "You need help?" Ibrahim said, "From you, no. I want help from Allah." Tawheed. Although Jibreel is also, you know, in the in the vertical sense, helper and from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's an angel. But Ibrahim's Tawheedi vision is something beyond that. You know, from you, no. And then that Tawheed plays its magic, and that fire changes to garden. So the ashab of Imam Hussein were like, had that Tawheedi vision. You know, they are considered, I mean, you know, where the sixth Imam, he says that, "May my life sacrifice to the ashab of Hussein." An Imam mentioning this, right, points out to the maqam and position and the hearts of these ashab, right? So the you know, the rams or the secret of between Imam Hussein and us and taking lesson, you know, that joins us is Imam al-Asr alayhi salam. That's how I personally see here. Yeah.
And using the ashab as a example of that is helpful, because just like Abu Abdullah has ashab, so does our Imam. And to want to help one Imam is, and using that as motivation to help the Imam of our time, is in fact the same endeavor, the same exercise of being of service to the Imam. And that's great motivation for us, because it's that even though, okay, you were not alive at Karbala, you were not alive then, but you are alive now. And just like the companions then earn a certain maqam, we can earn the same maqam. But it may well be though that I look at this and say, okay, I get that, but I'm not there yet. I know my limitations. I know that I have not strove to reach that level. And maybe the companions can themselves be inspiration from the journey of my heart. Aliasghar, I know you're going to go and recite for Muharram, inshallah, from the first of Muharram. When you look at the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, do you see their journey? Do you see their struggle? Do you see the way they are growing and developing? I mean, the peak of it is, of course, the moment of their shahadat and day of Ashura, but they have such different lives and different backgrounds. It's almost like we can relate to them, or at least learn from where they start off to follow their footsteps. Do you agree that's a healthy way of looking at the companions?
100%. if there's anything we need to take from the companions, it's how to be a true companion of our Imam. The companions all have, as you said, different journeys. As in, a lot of people like to look at the example of Hur, because perhaps that's one of the most apt for us. Somebody who's going completely the wrong way and then turns the right way. But even that had a foundation. We always have to remember that foundation. The love of Fatima al-Zahra. There was a foundation for him. That when Imam al-Hussein triggered it, suddenly it caused a change back to the right path. But even, the humility, if somebody comes to you and says something like that to you, and I often say this in some of my lectures, especially to children, if the Imam was to say to you, may your mother cry over you, how, for example, how sometimes we used to say when we were kids at first, your mom, as a rude thing, imagine the Imam comes to say something like that to you. If you have ego, there's no chance you're coming back from that. You're going the opposite way. But it shows Hur even has that foundation of there that, no, wait, this is the Imam. I'm not going to take this in the wrong way. I have to think about what he said. If even our parents tell us, sometimes we can't stand it. We can't take it. Because there's an ego in there that can't take it. But the Imams would sometimes tell their companions off. But that was, again, because they wanted those companions to change, to get back to the right path. And so when we look at the companions, we can connect to their journeys, but we can see where we are on that journey as well. There's stories of some individuals who didn't come for Imam al-Hussein. A famous one, Ubaydullah ibn al-Hurr al-Ju'fi, mentioned in the Maqatil literature, who the Imam came and offered him and told him, come. And he gave the excuse of his family and his house. He says, if I come to you, what will happen to my family and my house? Yet we see Habib ibn Madahir, the messenger comes to him and gives him the letter of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. And he leaves his wife to go towards Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. And so it shows that even while we have to be loving to our family, Rasulullah would say, the best among you is the best with their family, and I am the best with my family. When it comes to service of the Imam comes before the family. And we sacrifice ourselves and our families and our parents for the Imam. That's, things for us to think about. Where are we on that journey? If, for example, Imam al-Mahdi reappeared today, and we had to leave London and go to, for example, Iraq, how many of us would leave our day jobs and everything that we have and be prepared to just go, which is what a lot of the companions did. And so when we look at the companions, sometimes we don't study the companions in as much detail. Perhaps we look at just the occasion of martyrdom. But if we study them in a little bit more detail, sometimes we find very practical factors on how we can truly connect to the Imam, and also we can gauge ourselves on our journey. Where am I on my journey compared to them? Because if I want to be an ashab of the Imam, I have to compare myself to an ashab of the Imam. And they were true ashab. As Imam al-Hussein said, in a statement that baffles me sometimes. He says, I thank Allah for granting me companions that He did not grant to my father, nor did He grant to my brother. And he only had, 108 max, 72 minimum. That's the amount of companions the Imams ever had. But these were the quality of those companions. And so they ought to be inspirations for us on our path, inshallah.
Inshallah. And this is such a dynamic way of looking at Muharram. I'm not going to mourn for the companions and then moving on to the family and then ending Ashura and going home. No, there's practical amal we take from the companions to try and make ourselves more worthy of at least that title. Sheikh, when you look at the companions, do you take any practical advice or from them, or do you see examples for them which maybe we need to prioritize as a community or as an individual from the Ashab of Abu Abdullah? Are there any in particular which stand out to you?
I think the element of ubudiyat, servitude, the element of ita'at to the Imam, these are very important major lessons that we find. The element of isar, self-sacrifice to the highest level that we find amongst the ashab of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, practically speaking. The element of istiqama, steadfastness with the Imam, right? Even Imam turns the light off, puts the light off, but still they are there. Even the paradise is guaranteed, the shafaat is guaranteed. But, the hereafter, Jannah is of not value. What is of value is being with the Imam. What is of value is the ma'rifat of the Imam. What is of value is closeness to the Imam. dunya akhirah doesn't really, make any difference. As long as I am near the Imam, as long as the heart of the Imam is happy with me, as long as I am, pleasing him, although he is guaranteeing me paradise, but, I'm not looking at paradise. I'm looking at what, I'm looking at the Imam. My focus is the Imam, Ana Majnoonul Hussein, Ana Majnoonul Hussein, right? That's the point, the crazy love of Hussein. And Hussein's crazy love for Allah. So when one annihilates in the love of Hussein, eventually one will annihilate in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So the ashab were like that, they were crazy lovers. Now, being crazy lovers does not mean that they forgot their family, as Brother Aliasghar pointed out to. I'm the best towards my family, but when it comes to Allah, when it comes to Imam, obviously, that's a priority. Awla, Rasul and Awlad is a priority. So they were caretakers. They fulfilled their responsibilities. So therefore, practically speaking, if I have children, I have family, I'm not gonna, oh no, I'm going to Majlis. I come back at 3 a.m. or something, and leaving my family. No, family. Imam Hussein took the whole family. Ashab, they were there with the family, right? Yes, maybe there could be some restrictions and limitations that come about with the family, but this should not become the reason for one to no, because I want to go to Majlis and I am the one who love Imam Hussein, and my family is the fitna. They are the hurdles. They are. See, I become judgmental. It's a test. Allah test us. Sometimes it could be possible that just because you have your certain practical responsibilities, an appointment for your family, for your children, school. Now schools are off. You may have to leave early, for example. You may have to miss something. That missing of yours for the sake of family is actually a test, and it's for Imam Hussein. Okay, so you have to keep all of these practical aspect, in mind, and at the same time, having that ita'at, that obedience towards the Imam, towards the cause of the Imam, and preparing ourselves, inshallah.
Inshallah, this is maybe my favorite point that we have gone through so far. And it's hard to choose because there have been so many, but ita'at in this way, like I owe it to Abu Abdullah, and I owe it to my Imam. And if the link between me and Imam al-Hussein is the Imam of my time, then I owe nothing short of ita'at to my Imam. And if I want to know what that actually looks like, I have 72 to 108 examples of what that looks like. I have so many stories and examples that I hear on the minbar, in the Musa'ib, in the Nohas, in the Marthiyah, all the time. There's no getting around this. My heart, one of the rights of the heart now, it seems, is to be reformed in this way. This is its potential, and it deserves to be reached in that way. I hope the listener comes to a similar conclusion. I want to ask one final question, before we close. And that is that many of these concepts we're discussing, ita'at and loyalty and love and growth and reformation, some of these things we can take from the majlis for sure. We can take them from weeping, from mourning. That is part of it. But many of these things continue after the majlis. It's the work that you're actually doing is when you leave the gatherings that we have the blessing for, it's the internal work that we have to do. What I'd like to ask both of you, and maybe first Aliasghar, is how should we carry it on? How should we behave in the 10 days of Muharram that have now just begun in order to make sure we are taking something and keeping it with us for the rest of the journey? This is part of the journey, but I am needed to continue this work. How do I take all of this benefit of Imam al-Hussein further?
I think number one, making a sincere intention. It's a sincere volition, I should say. Intention sometimes is a word that people take passively. when you look at niyyah in the way we hear about niyyah in hadith, it's not a passive thing, it's an active thing. You know, Imam al-Baqir even says, "An-niyyatu hiya al-amal." The intention is the action, meaning the intention is so solid that it results in action. It will never result in inaction. Many a times we think, oh, I made a niyyah, but then I don't know, I get weak and I don't fulfill the action. Then that niyyah wasn't strong. That wasn't a niyyah. That was just a passing thought. A niyyah is strong and it leads towards action. So making a sincere niyyah and asking Allah to help us to reform ourselves, number one, that we want to create some change. Number two, and this is something I'm starting to appreciate more with time, maybe taking some notes or jotting down some points at the end of every majalis. I learned this today, or I've reflected on this today. You know, when we're younger, sometimes people have diaries or something like that. Maybe having a Muharram diary, and you're never too old to have something like this, where you just write down, I've reflected and realized this today. I never thought about this before. Or this is a point that I've heard 10 times, but I've never acted upon it. Now I'm going to write it down and I'm going to keep reminding myself of it. Maybe making it even like a note on your smartphone and keeping it on the front page. And, you know, we don't need to necessarily make too many points, just 1 or 2 points after every majalis, just so that we've gained something from this majalis. And then after the 10 days, not just going back to our old lives, but rereading these things and going through with the niyyah. Now let me act upon it. And if you want to be extra strong, you can even do something like a nidhr, where we say, if I don't do something, I'll fast in return or something like that. That's a method that's used by some of our ulama. The most famous one I remember, I think Abdullah Jawdi, he said, if I get angry, I will fast for an entire year. And he had one moment of slight anger and he went to fast for an entire year. Maybe that'll be too strong for some people, but just making a sincere intention that you want to write something down. You know, the amount of people I'm sure both of you have come across who say, oh, your lecture was amazing, but I don't remember anything from it. So just making 1 or 2 notes every night, nothing too much, just 1 or 2 points that, you know what, this is something that stuck out to me today, and then trying your best to act upon it. You might not act upon everything from that lecture, but if you act upon one thing from that lecture, then that lecture was beneficial for you. So that's something I think might be quite beneficial for most people, inshallah.
Inshallah. So taking notes, finding the right lessons from the lecture, and actual amal and practice. So another is one example. There are other examples, of course, but doing action linked to the knowledge we have gained and allowing it to breathe. These are very useful and practical for me, and I'm sure for you listening. Sheikh, same question to you. Any advice on the conduct we should have when going to the majlis, when our priority is what we are taking from the majlis for our own journey of the qalb?
I think Brother Aliasghar raised good points, practical points. Alhamdulillah, that should those are good to be considered, and especially as we tend to forget a lot, and they say write so that you don't forget, right? So it keeps the knowledge within the range of ours when we write. That's really good. Intention, that's very interesting as well. I mean, I think the preparation and the yearning and desire, I used all of these words for ihtimam. You know, they say ihtimam, having that sort of you know, that desire to attend and to be there and to learn and to gain is very important. And the same way as, you know, niyat is the amal itself, the reward, the change is placed on that ihtimam as well, right? We all love to bring that change quick in us, particularly when we are sitting in these majalis and I mean, whatever we have, as Imam Khimani have mentioned, is because of Muharram and Safar. You know, it's Muharram and Safar that have changed the Ummah and nations. It's Imam Hussein, you know, the energy of Imam Hussein is there that allows us to stay steadfast on the path of true Islam and Muhammadi, right? So, you know, that ihtimam of changing, the ihtimam of having that that love and that marifat takes place in these majalises. And that's why we find our youth, I myself, I changed because of majlis of Imam Hussain. I mean, you will agree with yourself as well, right? That the more we got more interested towards deen, towards Imam Hussain, towards that love, towards ibadat, it's all because of majlis of Imam Hussain, right? One thing that we need to know is that it will not be an overnight change. It will take time. It took us a lot of majalises of Imam Hussain, a lot of participation of Imam Hussain. It brought us where it brought us. Allah knows the heart, but however, from a Zahiri point of view, I'm talking about myself, it brought me where it brought me, to speak about Imam Hussain, that somebody is asking me, I'm answering, some people are listening, maybe some gaining or whatever, right? It is that, how shall I say, the change it took a lot of Muharrams, it took a lot of lectures, it took a lot of things. So don't expect that it will happen overnight like that, right? But the point is that constantly trying, okay? As they say in Surah Ankabut, that verse is that man
الذين جاهدوا فينا.
liqa, about the liqa Allah, ajlin, la'atin, there's the one who desires to meet Allah. A time is fixed, to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is Sami'ul Alim. These two names are used, Sami and Alim. We all love to meet Allah. That's to have that marifat. We all love to meet the Imam, to be the best of companion. But a time is fixed for that. Allah has fixed a time for that meeting to take place. And then the verse ends with Sami and Alim. He listens. He's Sami, he listens. If we call that, oh Allah, please give me the marifat, make me have that sort of irfani lover of Imam Hussain, that that marifat we want, that we want to be good. We don't want to even do something that is sin, leave aside a sin. We want to please the heart of the Imam, right? That's what we call for. That's what we ask for. That's the aspect of Sami. Allah is listening. But at the same time, he is Alim, right? He is all-knowing. Alim means that he knows the precise things in us. Alim have that aspect to know the precise nature of things, right? Now, I may be not on that level to have that preciseness in my understanding, or to have that sort of purity, in the sense that I could have a mukashafa, or I could be given something. Right? I want that, but I'm not on that level. The child, the kid, the child asks the father for for a Ferrari, for example, a racing car or something, because he loves cars. The father is not going to give him a key to the racing car when he is just 5 and 6 years old. He's not ready for it. He's asking for it. He loves it. He wants it, but it's not good for that person. So we maybe, we want, but we may not be on that level. So what does this mean? That means that we should not let go asking. We should continuously ask, continuously try. We should try to learn how to drive. The father will say, okay, if you want that, okay, do this amal, to learn driving, give this test, that test. For us, the same way, if we want to be, on the path of Ahl Bayt, purify yourself, watch your heart, muhaseba, calculate yourself, write it down. All of these practical things are there. But asking, okay, you can ask for it. You ask for Maqam Mahmud in Ziyarat Ashura. Maqam Mahmud, is for Rasulullah. We ask for this reward of what the Shuhada got, the reward of Imam Hussain. Imagine they have done so much and they got that reward. We are just sitting in the comfort of our room and we say, oh Allah, give us that reward. Yes, for asking, no problem. But we have to practically also do things and never be disheartened. Time will come. The time is fixed. Inshallah, we all will be helpers and supporters and true helpers and supporters of Imam Al-Asr alayhi salam, inshallah.
So we begin our journey of reform with the heart, with the qalb. This part of ourselves which turns to Allah by its natural inclination and its original form, which maybe over time has suffered through hardness or sin or other priorities which were not God. But the month of Muharram, like in so many things sent by Allah Azza wa Jal, reminds us to go back to the origin. And reform, islah, and the definition which we can use going forward for the rest of this series, is simply to go back. Is to go back to the origin, to where we came from, to our original state, which is ubudiyah, as Sheikh beautifully said, which is worship, obedience and loyalty to God. And in that process, we will naturally find ourselves being loyal to our Imam and the Imam of our time, as well as Abu Abdullah. These things come naturally. And wasn't it interesting? Was it not curious that for me to be close to Imam al-Hussein, the Imam of my time, is a crucial part of that link? All of the narrations and the verses of Quran related to the development of the heart and softening the heart and purifying the heart. If I want to find practical actions for this, whether it's writing down or having a good intention and maintaining my intention, or any of these actions, my Imam must be central to that. And so as me and you continue this journey of reform, going from now, inshallah, until walking towards Ashura, we are slowly going to be expanding what it means to reform ourselves in a more and more wider and holistic way. And we should keep in mind that my Imam, the 12th Imam, and his return, his duhur, is part of this process. He is the thing I am trying to reform myself for or towards. He is part of my journey to God. And this makes us all active and practical in why we are even going to the Majalis of Imam al-Hussein, what we are gaining from it. In addition to mourning for Abu Abdullah, I want revenge, and I want progress, and I want growth, and I will only get these things if I genuinely and truthfully intend them, and the rest of it follows. So I hope that you intend reform in this way, returning back to the fitrah, the nature that we have towards God. And for the rest of this journey, as we continue reforming the mind and the body and the soul, we hope that we can start to understand ourselves more, and by understanding ourselves we know God and we know our Imam.